Year 122 AD. Roman Britain, raw, windswept, and perilous, marked the furthest northern frontier of the Roman Empire. Beyond its fortified line stretched vast lands ruled by the fierce Brigantes, the elusive Picts, and the indomitable Caledonians. It was here, on this freezing edge of the known world, that Legio IX Hispana, one of Rome's most storied units, held its lonely post, a legion hardened by decades of war, a legion trusted by Caesar himself. Yet 50 years later, it would vanish completely. Not a single official roster, not a solitary dispatch, not even a whisper of its final fate remained in the imperial archives. It was as if the Ninth had been erased from existence. The origins of Legio IX have always been wrapped in uncertainty. Some ancient sources credit its formation to Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, Pompey the Great, around 65 BC in Spain, during the campaigns that helped elevate him to legendary status. Others trace the unit's lineage back even further to 89 BC, when a Ninth Legion under Pompey's father, Gnaeus Pompeius Strabo, fought at the siege of Asculum during the Social War. Whether that early legion was the ancestor of Caesar's Ninth or merely shared its number is still debated by modern historians. What is certain is that, on the eve of the Gallic Wars, Legio IX was stationed in Aquileia, guarding Rome's northeastern frontier against Illyrian tribes. In 58 BC, everything changed. Caesar, newly appointed to Gaul, absorbed the Ninth into his army, placing it alongside the 7th, 8th, and the famed 10th Legion. Under Caesar's personal command, the Ninth would carve out much of its lasting reputation. The legion fought with brutal efficiency against the Helvetii, contributed to the crushing of the Belgae at the Battle of the Sabes, helped repel the Germanic incursion under Ariovistus, and later took part in suppressing the massive Gallic revolt led by Ambiorix. Its most iconic moment came at Alesia, where the Ninth stood in Caesar's inner ring of fortifications, helping encircle the united Gallic tribes under Vercingetorix. Though the exact details of the Ninth's actions are only sparsely recorded, its presence at nearly every major engagement leaves little doubt about its importance in Caesar's victories. When the Roman Republic collapsed into civil war, the Ninth remained fiercely loyal to Caesar. It fought bravely at Ilerda, at Pharsalus, and even during Caesar's near-catastrophic reversal at Dyrrhachium. After Pompey's death in Egypt, the Ninth returned to Italy before being sent to North Africa, where it helped crush the remnants of the Pompeian forces at Thapsus. By this time, Legio IX was one of Caesar's most seasoned and battle-tested units, soldiers forged through years of relentless campaigning. Caesar trusted them more than most. When a position had to be held, he sent the Ninth. When a breakthrough was needed, he sent the Ninth. Its veterans had come to form part of Caesar's elite inner corps, a unit that could be counted on when others wavered. In 46 BC, after the final victory in Africa, Caesar returned to Rome and formally disbanded the Ninth along with other legions that had served since the start of the Gallic campaigns. Its veterans received land in Picenum, settling into quiet retirement. At least for a while. Caesar's assassination in 44 BC plunged the Republic back into chaos, and within a few years, the veterans of the Ninth were recalled. According to some accounts, Octavian, the future Augustus, reconstituted the legion in 41 BC and sent it to Sicily, where Sextus Pompey, the last son of Pompey the Great, had seized control of the island and strangled Rome's grain supply. Other sources claim the Ninth had already been reformed a year earlier and had participated in the Battle of Philippi before heading to Sicily. Regardless of which version is correct, the legion earned its first honorary title, Macedonica, during this period. Once Sextus Pompey was defeated, the Ninth was stationed in Macedonia, but its rest would not last long. During the final civil war between Octavian and Mark Antony, the Ninth fought again, this time at the decisive Battle of Actium. Octavian's crushing naval victory ended the last great conflict of the Roman Republic and ushered in the age of the Roman Empire. Soon after the civil wars ended, the Ninth was transferred to Spain to join the brutal Cantabrian Wars under Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, Octavian's right-hand man. The Cantabrians were fierce mountain warriors, deeply resistant to Roman rule, and the campaign required 8 full legions and numerous auxiliaries. Legio IX distinguished itself once again in the harsh terrain, earning the honorary title Hispaniensis, later shortened to Hispana, the Spanish Legion. Another title, Triumphalis, appears in later inscriptions, though the exact context of its award remains unclear. It may have been granted after a major victory or during an imperial triumph. After Augustus's death, the Ninth was sent back to Pannonia, guarding the Danube frontier against the Germanic tribes. Yet trouble flared elsewhere. A dangerous Numidian revolt erupted in North Africa, led by Tacarinas, a former Roman auxiliary who understood Roman tactics intimately and trained his fighters in Roman-style cohorts. Despite the well-organized resistance, the Ninth's seasoned veterans crushed the rebellion and restored order. The legion then returned to Pannonia, stationed at Siscia, modern Croatia, under the command of the future British governor Aulus Plautius. Soon, it would follow him across the sea to Britain, a land that had haunted Roman ambitions since Caesar's expeditions a century earlier. In 43 AD, Emperor Claudius launched a massive full-scale invasion of Britain. The Ninth Legion landed alongside the 2nd Augusta, the 14th Gemina, and the 20th Valeria Victrix. They swiftly defeated the Britons led by Caradocus and Togodumnus at the Medway and the Thames, establishing Roman control over much of southern Britain. Forts sprang up across the new province. Many would later grow into modern cities such as Colchester, Lincoln, London, and Manchester. The Ninth was posted across several of these forts, forming the backbone of the new frontier. For a decade, the province remained relatively stable, with the exception of a brief revolt led by Caradocus. But in 60 AD, everything changed with the rise of Boudica, queen of the Iceni. Her rebellion would become one of the greatest crises Rome ever faced in Britain. The spark that ignited the Boudican revolt was a mix of political arrogance and cultural ignorance. When King Prasutagus of the Iceni died, he attempted a compromise meant to safeguard his family and his people, leaving his kingdom jointly to his daughters and to the Roman emperor. But Roman law did not recognize female inheritance, and officials acting in Nero's name seized the territory outright. Boudica was humiliated, publicly beaten, and her daughters assaulted. The Iceni rose in fury, and one tribe after another joined them. What began as vengeance became a full-scale uprising threatening to obliterate Rome's entire presence in Britain. The revolt spread with astonishing speed. In a matter of weeks, Boudica's warriors overran the colony at Camulodunum, Colchester, razing it to the ground and slaughtering thousands of Roman settlers. The nearest major Roman force was the Ninth Legion, scattered among various forts. Acting quickly, and perhaps rashly, Quintus Petilius Carialis, commander of one of the Ninth's detachments, marched out with 4 cohorts and a small cavalry contingent to intercept the rebels. Either he underestimated the scale of the uprising or believed Roman discipline alone could overcome tribal numbers. Whatever his reasoning, he was disastrously wrong. Boudica's forces surrounded the detachment and annihilated it almost to the last man. Only a handful of cavalry escaped with Carialis back to Lindum, modern Lincoln, while nearly 2,000 legionaries of the Ninth were killed. It was the single greatest loss in the legion's recorded history. Even though Governor Suetonius Paulinus ultimately crushed the rebellion at the Battle of Watling Street, the Ninth's reputation suffered immensely. There was talk of disbanding the shattered unit altogether, but Rome chose instead to rebuild. Reinforcements, about 2,000 fresh recruits from the Rhine frontier, arrived to restore the legion's strength. The Ninth returned to its duties, though a shadow now hung over its name. Years later, in an unexpected twist of fate, Cerealis himself returned to Britain as governor. Having redeemed his military reputation through successful campaigns along the Rhine, he took charge of 3 legions, the Second Augusta, the XX Valeria Victrix, and the IX Hispana. Determined to secure the volatile northern frontier, Cerealis launched a rapid and aggressive campaign against the Brigantes, one of the most powerful tribes in Britain. Under his leadership, the Ninth captured territory, established new forts, and expanded Roman influence deeper into the north. One of these forts would eventually develop into Eboracum, modern-day York, the future military and political heart of Roman Britain. In 77 AD, a new governor arrived, Gnaeus Julius Agricola, one of Rome's finest generals and an experienced commander who had earlier served as legate of the 20th Legion. Agricola wasted no time. He initiated a sweeping northern campaign designed not merely to defend the frontier, but to push Rome's authority into the lands of the Caledonians, tribes inhabiting what is now Scotland. During this harsh and relentless advance, the Ninth once again found itself in grave danger. According to Tacitus, a combined force of Brigantes and Caledonians launched a surprise attack on the legion's camp under cover of night. The Britons breached the fortifications, and chaos erupted within the camp. The Ninth, already stretched thin across the frontier, fought desperately to hold their position. The situation was on the brink of collapse when Agricola, marching swiftly with reinforcements, arrived just in time. His intervention saved the Ninth from what could have been another catastrophic defeat. The attackers were driven off with heavy losses, and the legion regained its footing on the frontier. The last confirmed historical record of the Ninth Legion comes from 109 AD, noting that it was rebuilding its fortress walls at Eboracum from wood to stone, a sign that the Roman administration intended the legion to remain a permanent fixture in Britain. Another inscription from 122 AD mentions Lucius Aemilius Carus as one of its tribunes, confirming the legion was still active at that time. And then, almost without warning, it disappears from the historical record. The sudden silence surrounding Legio IX Hispana has captivated historians for centuries. Despite its earlier misfortunes, the Ninth was still a functioning and respected unit by 122 AD. Its disappearance during a period of imperial stability, when legions were rarely destroyed or dissolved, makes the mystery even more compelling. Unlike the chaotic 3rd century, where numerous legions vanished amid invasions and civil wars, the early 2nd century was a golden age of Roman power. That is precisely why the Ninth's fate stands out. To understand the mystery fully, it's important to recognize that the Ninth was not perfect. Far from it. For all its achievements, it had committed one of the gravest sins in Roman military culture: mutiny. Not once, but 3 times across its long history. The first mutiny took place during Caesar's civil war near Placentia. The legion's soldiers, exhausted after years of campaigning, demanded discharge, overdue pay, and the land Caesar had promised them. Their frustration was understandable, but their rebellion was intolerable. Caesar initially intended to punish the entire unit with decimation, a brutal ritual in which every 10th man was executed. Instead, he disbanded the legion in disgrace. The shame proved overwhelming. Its soldiers begged to be restored, promising renewed loyalty. Caesar relented, punishing only the ringleaders and returning the legion to service. The second mutiny occurred in 14 AD, shortly after Augustus's death. Alongside two other legions in Pannonia, the Ninth revolted over harsh conditions, delays in pay, and abusive centurions. The situation deteriorated so badly that their commander, Germanicus, had to intervene personally, executing the worst offenders and scattering the legions across multiple forts. The third mutiny was more unusual, and almost unusual enough to be humorous, if not for the severity of its implications. On the eve of the invasion of Britain, soldiers from the Ninth and other legions refused to board their ships. These were men used to the calm waters of the Mediterranean. The choppy, unpredictable Atlantic terrified them. The crisis was only resolved when Narcissus, a freedman and the Emperor Claudius's secretary, boldly stepped onto a ship and berated the soldiers, mocking their fear. To be publicly shamed by a freedman, a status considered permanently inferior in Roman society, was unbearable. Enraged, the soldiers stormed aboard their ships, shouting "Io Saturnalia," referencing the festival where slaves and masters switched roles. Fear turned into fury, and the invasion proceeded. Yet despite these blemishes, the Ninth remained a symbol of Roman might in Britain. Its disappearance, whether through battle, reassignment, or quiet dissolution, became an irresistible enigma. Next, analyze the major hypotheses regarding the disappearance of Legio IX Hispana, from the possibility that it was destroyed in Britannia, reassigned to other provinces, or quietly disbanded, while also examining historical clues and traces of its officers to shed light on this mystery. The mystery of Legio IX Hispana begins the moment its name vanishes from the official rosters. Sometime after 122 AD, during the reign of Emperor Hadrian, the Ninth simply stops appearing in the epigraphic and administrative record. No final posting, no commendation, no transfer order, nothing. This silence has allowed centuries of speculation, ranging from sober academic theories to dramatic tales of entire legions swallowed by the mists of the north. To unravel the possibilities, it is necessary to examine not only what might have happened, but why the Ninth's disappearance feels so puzzling in the first place. Many Roman legions vanished from the historical record, especially during the chaotic 3rd and 4th centuries. But the Ninth disappeared during an era of stability known as the Pax Romana, a time when the military bureaucracy was unusually well organized. Records of legions stationed across the empire, numbering, honors, permanent bases, were normally consistent and well preserved. The fact that an entire legion disappears during this orderly period is what makes the Ninth's fate stand out so sharply. Complicating the picture is the way popular culture elevated the mystery. In 1866, archaeologists excavating the Roman town of Silchester discovered a bronze eagle. Though not a legionary aquila, the mere resemblance was enough to fire public imagination. Nearly a century later, in 1954, British novelist Rosemary Sutcliffe transformed the idea into her classic novel, The Eagle of the Ninth, the tale of a young Roman officer venturing north to retrieve his father's lost standard electrified public interest. The 2011 film adaptation cemented the Ninth as the most famous lost legion in Roman history. But fiction aside, historians have proposed several serious theories to explain what may have happened after 122 AD. Theory 1. The Ninth was destroyed in Britain. This is the most dramatic interpretation and the one that captured the public imagination. According to this theory, sometime between 122 and 130 AD, the Ninth was annihilated in a disastrous campaign against northern tribes, likely the Brigantes or Caledonians. These tribes had demonstrated their ferocity repeatedly. Agricola himself had nearly lost the legion decades earlier, and the violent terrain of Scotland was infamous for swallowing Roman forces whole. Proponents of this theory point to one detail: Hadrian's decision to build the wall around 122 AD. Some suggest that the ninth's destruction prompted Rome to secure a permanent frontier. Yet, Hadrian's wall was part of a wider imperial policy of consolidating borders, not necessarily a reaction to a military disaster. More critically, no ancient historian, neither Cassius Dio, nor Tacitus, nor Spartianus, mentions the destruction of an entire legion in Britain during this period. For an event of such magnitude, this silence is striking. Archaeology has also failed to produce evidence of a mass battlefield grave, abandoned legionary fortress, or any artifact conclusively linked to the ninth's annihilation. Without these, the lost in Scotland theory, however captivating, remains speculative. Theory 2. The ninth was transferred to the continent. This theory gained traction in the late 20th century after discoveries in the Netherlands and Germany. Several inscriptions and stamped tiles mentioning Legio IX Hispana were found near Nijmegen, suggesting that the legion, or at least parts of it, operated along the Lower Rhine frontier after its last confirmed appearance in Britain. However, these inscriptions appear to belong to a vexillatio, a detachment rather than the entire legion. This casts doubt on the idea of a full relocation. Other inscriptions show that auxiliary units from Britain were moved to the Rhine around 113 AD, and it is possible that a portion of the ninth accompanied them either temporarily or permanently. A key piece of evidence came from Trier, where an altar dedicated by Lucius Latinius Macer, Prefectus Castrorum of the Ninth Legion, was discovered. Yet the altar suggests that Macer was commanding a detachment, not a full legion, because sacrifices for a full legion would typically be performed by the legate or a senior tribune. This suggests the ninth may have been broken into smaller units or redistributed across provinces long before it vanished. But if the legion was transferred, why does it not appear in later rosters? One answer is that it may have been merged into another legion, quietly dissolved, or suffered losses too severe to justify rebuilding. Theory 3. The ninth was destroyed in the east. A more distant theory, but not impossible, suggests that the ninth met its end far from Britain. Two major conflicts occurred in the east during the 2nd century that could have consumed a legion. The Bar Kokhba revolt, 132–135 AD in Judea. The Parthian War, 161 AD, where Cassius Dio mentions a Roman legion destroyed at Alesia. Could the ninth have been involved? In theory, yes, but the evidence is thin. During the Bar Kokhba revolt, Rome deployed the 6th Ferrata and 10th Fretensis, both of which suffered heavy casualties. Yet no ancient source mentions an additional legion being wiped out. Given the scale of the conflict and the meticulous nature of the record-keeping in the eastern provinces, the absence of any reference to the ninth is difficult to overlook. As for the Parthian War, most historians identify the destroyed legion as Vaitituand Deotariana, not the ninth. That legion also disappears from records, but was definitely stationed in the east at the time, unlike the ninth, whose presence there is entirely uncorroborated. Thus, while possible, the Eastern destruction theory lacks direct support. Theory 4. Quiet disbandment. The least sensational and arguably most plausible theory is that the ninth was quietly dissolved during a routine restructuring of the Roman army. Several legions suffered heavy losses, but were not ceremonially recorded as destroyed. Instead, their remaining soldiers were absorbed into other legions, and the unit number simply faded away. This happened to the XX Valeria Victrix, the 14th of Gemina after the 4th century, and the 2nd Augusta, among others. The ninth's disappearance may have followed a similar path, perhaps after suffering attrition, failing a campaign, or simply falling below operational strength. What makes this possibility compelling is the fate of two of its tribunes, the tribunes who might hold the key. Two aristocrats served as tribunes in the Ninth Legion shortly before its disappearance. Lucius Aemilius Carus left the Ninth around 121 AD. Lucius Saturninus succeeded him, serving until roughly 124 AD. Their subsequent careers diverged dramatically. Carus rose through Roman political ranks with exceptional speed. Quaestor, tribune of the people, praetor, legionary legate, consul, and finally governor of Arabia and Cappadocia. His trajectory is exactly what one would expect of a young, successful noble who served honorably. Saturninus, however, vanished from public record for 13 years after his service in the Ninth, an enormous and unusual gap. When he finally reappeared, he received only a modest provincial post. Such a dramatic stall could point to one of two possibilities. He fled a disaster, perhaps the destruction of the Ninth. He was captured, spending years in captivity before returning to Rome. Whatever happened, Saturninus's missing years remain the most tantalizing personal clue to the Ninth's fate. Whether destroyed, dissolved, or quietly absorbed, the true end of Legio IX Hispana remains one of Rome's unsolved mysteries. And perhaps that is why the Ninth still captures the imagination. Its story ends not with certainty, but with questions, leaving room for discovery, speculation, and legend. To carry the story forward, we will examine the political-military context of Hadrian's reign, the upheavals along the Britannian frontier, and the possibilities of military reorganization, thereby showing how Legio IX Hispana may have been weakened, transferred, or quietly disbanded during the empire's restructuring. Despite the many theories proposed over the years, the truth remains that the disappearance of Legio IX Hispana is not fully captured in any surviving ancient source. To understand why this silence is so profound, it is worth examining the broader geopolitical context of the empire between 122 and 150 AD, the crucial window during which the Ninth vanishes. By exploring what Rome was facing, what pressures the frontier endured, and how imperial policy shifted during this period, we can build a more accurate landscape against which the Ninth's fate may be judged. During the early 2nd century, Rome was governed by a succession of rulers known to historians as the Five Good Emperors: Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. This was one of the most stable and prosperous eras in Roman history. Legions were rarely destroyed in this period, and administrative records were generally robust. The empire was expanding under Trajan and reorganizing under Hadrian. Nowhere does any ancient historian suggest that a full legion vanished in catastrophic battle during these years. And yet, the Ninth disappears right in the middle of this stability. This alone makes its absence extraordinary. If the legion had been annihilated on the battlefield, especially within the empire's northernmost province, one would expect contemporary writers, Dio, Fronto, Tacitus, or even lesser annalists, to at least mention a defeat of such magnitude. Roman authors were quick to record disasters, even if later emperors tried to hide them. The annihilation of Varus's legions in Teutoburg Forest in 9 AD, for instance, echoed for generations. But there is no such lament for the Ninth. Still, this does not eliminate the possibility that Legio IX Hispana faced destruction, only that it was not considered important enough by the political powers of the day to record explicitly. And that leads to a subtler possibility. Perhaps the legion suffered losses, but the empire deliberately downplayed or obscured the details. A shifting frontier and the rise of Hadrian's Wall. One cannot talk about the Ninth's disappearance without discussing Hadrian's Wall, begun around 122 AD. Stretching more than 70 miles across northern Britain, it represented one of the most sophisticated frontier systems of the ancient world, a permanent stone barrier marking the official northern boundary of Roman Britain. Some historians once argued that Hadrian ordered the wall's construction in response to the destruction of the Ninth. But modern scholarship challenges this idea. Hadrian was known for halting Trajan's expansionist campaigns and consolidating Rome's borders, from Mesopotamia to Dacia. Building a wall in Britain aligned perfectly with his broader imperial strategy, regardless of whether a legion had been lost. Yet even if Hadrian did not build the wall because the Ninth was destroyed, the construction offers a clue. Britain was unstable. Tribal pressure was high. Uprisings flared. Even small-scale frontier wars could devastate isolated garrisons. The Ninth, already battered by past defeats, may have been stretched thin along the frontier, exposed to the violent turbulence of the North. Thus, the absence of a recorded catastrophe does not exclude the possibility of a slow, grinding reduction of the unit, its manpower depleted by raids, ambushes, or attritional warfare. A legion could die not in a single catastrophic battle, but by 1,000 small cuts. Reorganization under Hadrian and Antoninus Pius. Another angle lies in imperial military policy. Both Hadrian and Antoninus Pius sought to streamline the legions, move units strategically, and distribute experienced soldiers where they were needed most. Legions that were under strength or lacked strong leadership were sometimes merged or quietly dissolved. One plausible scenario is that Legio IX Hispana was removed from Britain sometime after 122 AD, sent to another province, and eventually merged into another legion. If so, its veterans and officers would have been absorbed, its equipment redistributed, and its number allowed to fade. This would explain why no battlefield account exists, why its name disappears between 122 and 150, why some inscriptions appear on the Rhine but none afterward, why officials like Saturninus experienced long career gaps, why Hadrian's wall was built soon after, suggesting manpower had shifted, not vanished. This scenario is historically consistent with Roman practice, yet also unsatisfying for those seeking a more dramatic ending. Possible campaigns the Ninth might have joined. If the Ninth was indeed transferred, several potential destinations align with Rome's needs and timelines. 1. The Lower Rhine, Germania Inferior. Inscriptions mentioning the Ninth's officers near Nijmegen imply that at least a portion of the legion operated in this region. The Rhine frontier was active, and Rome frequently shifted troops there to reinforce fortifications or police local unrest. A weakened Ninth might have been ideal for temporary service in Germania. Dacia. After Trajan's conquest of Dacia, modern Romania, the region was fertile but volatile. Marcus Aurelius would later wage the Marcomannic Wars there. Although the Ninth is not explicitly listed among the Dacian legions, administrative reshuffling could have placed them there temporarily. Failure in a harsh frontier like Dacia could have resulted in dissolution. 3. Cappadocia or Arabia Petraea. Interestingly, Lucius Aemilius Carus, a tribune of the Ninth, would later govern these provinces, areas that saw significant military activity. If the Ninth were transferred eastward after Carus's tenure, he may have had influence over its placement. However, no Eastern inscriptions directly support this. 4. Judea or Syria. Though unlikely, the Ninth might have been deployed to reinforce the Eastern legions before or during the Bar Kokhba revolt, 132–135 AD. But again, no sources mention its presence in this region. In all these cases, the Ninth's disappearance could be attributed to administrative erasure rather than spectacular destruction. The administrative fade, a legion that slowly died. Administrative fading refers to a legion's gradual decline until it could no longer function effectively. It could result from chronic manpower shortages, disease outbreaks, high casualty rates in repeated skirmishes, lack of reinforcements, incompetent command, Political punishment. Internal mutiny. The Ninth had already mutinied multiple times. If the legion became associated with unreliability or instability, the high command may have viewed its dissolution as politically convenient. What makes this even more plausible is that the empire rarely advertised the dissolution of units. Weak, understrength, or disgraced legions were sometimes quietly retired to preserve Rome's image of invincibility. If the Ninth suffered a series of setbacks or disciplinary issues, especially after the Boudican disaster, the near death under Agricola, and possible frontier turmoil, absorbing it into other legions would have been both efficient and face-saving. Yet no matter how logical the administrative fade appears, the emotional power of a battlefield disappearance remains alluring. People do not build legends around paperwork and troop rosters. They build them around dramatic last stands, a literary afterlife. How a quiet ending became a legend. Regardless of how the Ninth truly ended, its absence from history created a vacuum easily filled by imagination. Since the 19th century, writers, poets, filmmakers, and historians have revived the Ninth's ghost repeatedly. In novels, it dies heroically in the Scottish Highlands. In films, it vanishes in a tribal ambush beyond the wall. In popular history, it becomes a cautionary tale of imperial overreach. In academic circles, it becomes a reminder of how incomplete the Roman record is. The legend persists because it is irresistible. A hardened legion walks into the mists of the north and never returns. Whether destroyed in battle, dissolved quietly, or relocated and forgotten, Legio IX Hispana lives on not through inscriptions or monuments, but through mystery itself. Continuing the narrative, we will examine the archaeological evidence, administrative traces, and data on officer careers to show that Legio IX Hispana may have gradually declined through losses, restructuring, and disruptions in prestige, quietly fading from the historical record rather than being destroyed in a single major battle. If there is one feature that makes the story of Legio IX Hispana unique among Rome's military histories, it is not merely that the legion vanished, it is the degree to which its disappearance refuses to sit still. Each new archaeological discovery, each inscription unearthed, each re-examination of administrative patterns seems to shift the narrative a little. The Ninth is a moving target. Its final chapter drifts like smoke across the northern frontier. To understand the mystery fully, we must explore the tools historians use to reconstruct lost legions, the gaps in our knowledge, and the unlikely clues that continue to surface. The archaeological puzzle. What Britain reveals and what it doesn't. Britain is one of the most excavated Roman provinces in the empire. Forts, roads, bathhouses, amphitheaters, and inscriptions have been uncovered across the landscape. If a legion had suffered catastrophic destruction in northern Britain, one might expect some physical evidence. A burned fort, a mass grave, abandoned armor, batches of stamped tiles, dispatch tablets in the Vindolanda archives. Yet so far, nothing connects directly to the Ninth. The Eboracum, York fortress, its main base, shows continuous Roman occupation well into the 3rd century. The presence of later legions, such as the 66 Victrix, is well documented, suggesting that when the Ninth disappeared, another unit quickly replaced it. This seamless transition could indicate a planned redeployment rather than a sudden collapse. Moreover, the Vindolanda tablets, a treasure trove of military correspondence from the early 2nd century, reveal much about the legions stationed along Hadrian's frontier. They mention the 1st cohort, the 6th legion, and numerous auxiliaries, but remain silent on the 9th. This silence is unusual, considering Vindolanda's proximity to the 9th's zone of operations. It suggests that by the time the tablets were written, mostly between 90 to 120 AD, the ninth may already have been stretched thin, redistributed, or operating in detachments rather than as a full legion. The archaeological record does not rule out destruction, but it also offers nothing to confirm it. The lost legion and the bureaucratic blind spot. Roman military records were extensive, but they were not invulnerable. Countless archives were destroyed by fires, civil wars, earthquakes, administrative restructuring, political censorship. A single missing ledger could erase the final movements of an entire unit. In fact, the disappearance of several other legions, including the Tecu Augusta and the Exeicon Valeria Victrix, shows how often legions simply fade out of documentation. The ninth's timing, however, remains the anomaly. Why would a legion vanish between 122 and 150 AD during one of the most administratively organized periods of Roman rule? One possibility is that the ninth was decommissioned during a policy shift under Antoninus Pius, who advanced the frontier northward and built the Antonine Wall. If manpower was reorganized, amalgamated, or reassigned, the ninth's strength may have been distributed into other units, leaving behind no clear administrative trace. A legion dissolved under peaceful circumstances, especially one with a troubled disciplinary history, might not warrant a formal imperial pronouncement. A more dramatic theory: the ninth's final campaign. Some modern scholars propose a middle ground theory that blends the administrative and martial possibilities. The ninth was heavily damaged in a frontier conflict, survived temporarily in diminished form, and was dissolved soon afterward. This scenario fits several clues. Increased tribal activity in northern Britain around 120–130 AD, the construction of Hadrian's Wall, suggesting a need to reinforce defenses, career irregularities in officers like Lucius Saturninus, the absence of the ninth in northern inscriptions after 122 AD, the arrival of Legio IX Victrix in Britain shortly after 122. If the ninth suffered significant losses, maybe not total annihilation, but enough to compromise its reputation, Rome may have opted to remove it quietly. This is how a legion could vanish without leaving battlefield evidence. We know from other examples, such as the fate of Legio XXVIII Dei Otariana, that massive losses could be politically embarrassing. Emperors did not always want the public to know that Roman arms had failed, especially during the Pax Romana. A damaged legion could be quietly dissolved, its survivors merged elsewhere, and its name scratched from future rosters. Thus, the ninth may have died not in a glorious last stand, but through a slow administrative burial. The human side. What the ninth's officers reveal. Among the most intriguing clues to the ninth's fate lie not in ruins or inscriptions, but in the careers of its officers. We have already explored the striking contrast between Lucius Aemilius Carus and Lucius Saturninus, but even beyond them, the ninth's command structure hints at instability. Roman aristocrats used military tribuneships as stepping stones to political life. Their careers were carefully documented. When these careers stall, it often reflects a scandal, disaster, or association with a disgraced legion. Thus, officers who served with the ninth after 120 AD often show unusual career gaps, abrupt changes of assignment, redirections to minor posts, lack of senatorial promotions. This trend strongly suggests that something about the ninth's final years cast a shadow over those associated with it. The Roman world was acutely sensitive to honor and reputation. Serving with a legion that failed, whether through mutiny, heavy losses, or disgrace, could easily derail a career. This pattern does not conclusively prove the ninth faced disaster, but it is consistent with a legion that ended its life troubled, weakened, or politically inconvenient. The ninth's shadow in modern historiography. As new archaeological techniques emerge, LiDAR scanning, isotope analysis, GIS mapping, researchers continue searching for hints of the Ninth's final fate. Yet the Legion's story has also become a reflection of the times in which it is studied. In the Victorian era, the British Empire saw the Ninth as a romantic lost army in the wilderness. In the mid-20th century, authors used it to explore themes of honor, empire, and cultural conflict. In the 21st century, historians use the Ninth to examine Rome's imperial limits and the resilience of tribal societies. In this sense, the Ninth has become more than a military unit. It has become a symbol interpreted by each generation. Indeed, the mystery of the Ninth persists precisely because the evidence refuses to close the case definitively. Like a puzzle missing its final pieces, the Legion's ending remains tantalizingly incomplete, where all theories converge. Despite their differences, nearly all serious theories about the Ninth share several core truths. The Ninth was still active around 122 AD. It disappears from the record between 122 and 150 AD. No inscription or text definitively records its destruction. Some of its officers experienced disrupted careers. Another legion replaced it in Britain soon after 122 AD. Fragments of its presence appear on the Rhine, but not after 130 AD. These convergences shape the most balanced conclusion available. The Ninth likely suffered significant losses, was reassigned or reorganized, and was ultimately dissolved quietly, its name abandoned in favor of more stable units. Mystery remains, but so does coherence. Finally, we will synthesize all the evidence and hypotheses to show that Legio IX Hispana most likely dissolved quietly or was absorbed into other units, while also explaining why the mystery surrounding this legion has grown into a legend that transcends history. If the fate of Legio IX Hispana remains cloaked in mystery, its legacy endures in a far more concrete way. Few Roman legions, whether triumphant or disgraced, have exerted such magnetic power over the imagination. The Ninth story is not merely a tale of military history. It is a mirror reflecting the tension between empire and frontier, order and chaos, civilization and wilderness. And in many ways, it is the perfect lens through which to explore the limits of Roman power. Before we reach a final assessment, it is worth reconstructing what we know with certainty, what we can infer with confidence, and what may forever remain unknown. What we know for certain. Through inscriptions, dispatches, and archaeological remains, several facts are unmistakable. 1. The Ninth was active in Britain until at least 109 AD. Its fortress at Iberacum was rebuilt in stone by the legion, indicating long-term occupation and strategic importance. 2. In 122 AD, it had at least one recorded tribune. Lucius Aemilius Carus served with the Ninth shortly before Hadrian's visit to Britain. 3. The legion disappears from the official register sometime before 150 AD. In Marcus Aurelius's reign, Cassius Dio lists all active legions, and the Ninth is absent. 4. No ancient historian directly records its destruction. This absence is unusual for a Roman legion, especially during the stable 2nd century. 5. Some inscriptions linked to the Ninth appear on the Lower Rhine. These likely represent detachments, not the full legion. These are the firm stones upon which all theories must stand. What we can infer with confidence. While no single explanation has absolute proof, several conclusions are well supported by patterns from Roman administrative practice, archaeological continuity, and officer career trajectories. 1. The Ninth was weakened long before it disappeared. From the crushing defeat under Boudica to near destruction during Agricola's northern campaign, the Ninth endured repeated trauma. Legions often carried reputations, good or bad, across generations, and the ninth had acquired a reputation for both resilience and misfortune. 2. It was likely undermanned by 120 AD. The absence of Ninth Legion documents at Vindolanda, despite proximity to its sphere of operations, suggests that the legion was already stretched thin or reorganized into smaller units. 3. It was almost certainly removed from Britain. Hadrian's arrival in 122 AD, followed by the introduction of Legio IX Victrix, likely signals a troop rotation or replacement. Britain became one of Rome's most militarized provinces, and a legion with a troubled past was not ideal for a frontier undergoing large-scale restructuring. 4. Its dissolution was administrative, not catastrophic. No archaeological signature, no burned layer, no abandoned equipment, no mass graves, supports a battlefield annihilation. Its disappearance resembles other Roman legions that quietly faded from rosters after being weakened, merged, or repurposed. Thus, the ninth's end was probably quiet, bureaucratic, and undramatic. Yet paradoxically, this very quietness created the legend. What may forever remain unknown. Despite the clues, several questions remain unanswerable without new archaeological discovery. 1. Where was the legion stationed in its final years? Did it remain briefly in Britain? Did it serve on the Rhine? Was it sent eastward? The evidence is incomplete. 2. How was it finally dissolved? Was it folded into another legion, quietly retired, devastated in a minor frontier war? Administrative dissolutions rarely leave clear traces. 3. What role did its officers play in its fate? Especially puzzling is Lucius Saturninus, whose 13-year career silence may indicate disgrace, captivity, or trauma. 4. Did any of the ninth's symbols, its eagle, standards, or shields, survive? No archaeological record has revealed them yet. These gaps are why the ninth remains one of Rome's most persistent enigmas. The frontier problem. Britain as Rome's most difficult province. To understand why the ninth might have faltered, one must look at the nature of Britain itself. It was not simply a distant province. It was a frontier defined by irregular warfare. The tribes of northern Britain and Caledonia fought differently from the opponents Rome faced in Gaul or Germania. They avoided pitched battles. They engaged in ambush warfare. They struck supply lines. They used the terrain, forests, bogs, mountains, to their advantage. They never submitted fully to Roman rule. In such an environment, even veteran legions could bleed slowly and dangerously. The ninth spent nearly 8 decades in Britain, longer than most legions spent in any single province. The constant strain could have worn down its manpower and morale. In truth, the ninth may not have been destroyed in one dramatic event. It may have been consumed slowly by the frontier itself. A final hypothesis: the legion that outlived its identity. There is a theory, not widely known but compelling, that the ninth did not die at all. It simply lost its number. According to this view, by the mid-2nd century, the legion was too depleted to operate effectively, too tarnished by past failures, too administratively problematic. Rather than rebuild a troubled unit, Rome may have chosen to absorb the survivors into Legio VI Victrix when it arrived in Britain. Their pride, traditions, and banners may have been retired, but the soldiers themselves might have continued to serve. Thus, the ninth would not have died in battle. It would have been reborn under a different name, its identity quietly erased for the sake of political convenience and military efficiency. This explanation is elegant, plausible, and consistent with Roman administrative behavior. But it also carries a bittersweet weight. The legion that once stormed Alesia and stood beside Caesar himself may have faded away through paperwork rather than glory. Perhaps that is why the legend persists. A dramatic end is easier to accept than a quiet bureaucratic sigh. Legacy, the Ninth Legion in memory and myth. Today, the Ninth Legion exists not as an archaeological certainty, but as a cultural phenomenon. Its legacy survives in literature, from Rosemary Sutcliffe to modern historical fiction. Films like The Eagle, academic debate in journals and conferences, museums in York, Edinburgh, and London, ongoing excavations along Hadrian's Wall. The Ninth has become a symbol of the limits of empire, of Rome's vulnerability at its edges, of the thinness of the line separating civilization from wilderness. It also symbolizes the power of mystery itself. A legion with a clear ending is a fact. A legion without an ending becomes a story, and stories endure longer than stone walls. Conclusion: the lost legion that may never be found. In the end, the fate of Legio IX Hispana is less important than its impact. It invites us to question what we assume about empire, history, and memory. It reminds us that even the most powerful societies can lose pieces of themselves. It asks us to imagine, to search, to debate, and to keep an open mind. Whether destroyed, dissolved, or quietly reassigned, the Ninth's disappearance has carved a unique place in Roman history, a place where evidence falters and imagination begins. Somewhere between York's ancient stones and the windswept moors of the north, the Ninth marches still, half legend, half truth, forever lost and forever remembered.